And we have films that you may have seen showing this. The British film High Hopes captures the tomb in a brief sequence, but the best one is a documentary that the Swedes made called 24 Hours at Marx's Grave. And the whole thing, over an hour long, is dedicated to interviewing people who came to this tomb to see it from all over the world. And it is a magnificent thought that Marx, after having suffered so much in poverty, not having been able to make enough from his publications to begin to support his family, nevertheless is now still commanding this attention. People come from all over the world to see this tomb. And at the base of the monument are carved words from one of his writings, his theses on Feuerbach. The words that are carved around the base are these, and I think they say a lot. They've captured the right lines here on the tomb. Philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point, however, is to change it, to change the world. This was Marx's mission. He wanted a revolution, even more than Rousseau wanted it. And although he's had much more influence than most philosophers, it seems as though this mission has failed. That is, his message is today, despite all those visitors, those curious tourists coming to the tomb, his message is often discredited since the fall of the wall, since 1989, began the domino effect and brought down all of those dictatorships that were called, I think Marx would say wrongly, communist. Is it true that his theory then is invalid? Has it been disproved since the collapse of communism? That's one of the questions that I want to ask. But first we need to examine the main components of his philosophy in order to assess its worth. Marx begins, like Plato, with a theory of the self, and a self that has three distinct components. And here he's influenced in part by Rousseau. The natural self, the alienated self, and the species self. And like Rousseau, Marx sees the self in the progress of a three-stage evolution. First, there is the natural self in natural society, and this self embodies or represents or personifies our primary animal needs. And Marx says that these basic animal needs are, first of all, subsistence needs, that is, for food, for clothing, for shelter. Then he says our natural self has the innate need for sex, and finally for work. That is, we have a natural innate need to be engaged in some kind of productive activity. Now, these needs are natural in the sense that we need them to survive as a species. They are instinctive, but they're not informed by reason to any degree. They're innate, they're spontaneous, rather than being planned and self-conscious. But they do demand and expect fulfillment. And so in the natural state of mind and society, these needs and natural man is immature. But these needs provide the basis for maturation. And they are, as Rousseau's instincts, remember, of self-preservation and compassion, they are deeply rooted in us. So we've got the picture to begin with. Marx, theorizing about the evolution of humanity, sees then natural man in natural society to be defined in terms of these natural needs. And the natural needs beginning with subsistence needs of food, clothing, and shelter, and then on to sex. And as we'll see, most importantly, this is Marx's key contribution, and that is the belief that we have a need for work to be engaged in some kind of productive activity. Now, second, there is the alienated self in alienated society. And here's our old friend, the corrupt society that goes back to Plato, remember, and then Rousseau resurrects it forcefully when he talks about the corrupt society that we've just discussed, the modern society. Well, Marx, taking this same line from Rousseau, sees the present society as being a profoundly corrupt society, and Marx contributes a concept that Rousseau did not, and that's the concept of alienation. It is the alienated self in alienated society that he wants to discuss. This is our present condition in our contemporary Western society, created by, above all, the economic mode of production in which we find ourselves. It's certainly directly comparable to Rousseau's philosophy, that is, the corrupt society of Marx, comparable to Rousseau's corrupt society, but it has a number of distinctions, not just the concept of alienation that I mentioned, but the emphasis now on economics, not just the institution of private property, but the way in which the economic mode of production, specifically, of course, with Marx, the capitalist mode of production, creates this alienation. From Marx's point of view, it's this that's all important. Marx goes then much further than Rousseau in terms of developing his philosophy of the roots of the corruption in our society. That is, the roots lying in the system of capitalism that has alienated us from our basic needs. It's because of this systemic corruption, identified specifically in contemporary terms as capitalism. Because of capitalism, we are unfulfilled. Because of capitalism, we are divided against others and divided from ourselves. And that is the kind of alienation that Marx suggests is an alienation of each from all, but also the alienation exists within us. We are alienated from our essence, from our best self, from, as we'll see, our species being. All of this, then, this corruption, is presided over by inequality. Inequality, then, that is enforced by capitalism and distorts our existence. Some of us suffer in this state of inequality from being underfulfilled in terms of our subsistence needs. Others are overfulfilled. But Marx argues that both classes, the bourgeois class and the proletariat class, the class with the haves and the class of the have-nots, both classes, he says, are alienated from their essence, alienated from the discovery, from the fulfillment of their species being, from their humanity. Now this goes, as you can see, beyond Rousseau. Because of the system of capitalism, there has occurred a basic perversion of values, and this perversion of values infects us all. And Marx, as the prophet that he is, inveighs against what he calls the increasing value of the world of things. This proceeds in direct proportion the devaluation of the world of men. The only wheels which capitalism sets in motion are avarice and the war amongst the avaricious, that war being called competition. Private property, here he's of course taking his lines from Rousseau, private property has made us so stupid and one-sided that an object is ours only when we have it, when it exists for us as capital, or when it is directly possessed. We cannot conceive then of enjoying an object unless we have that ownership of it, unless we can call it our private property. And we delude ourselves into thinking that the more money we have, the richer will be our existence, the more security we will get, when in fact money only increases our wants. It only distances ourselves from our basic needs. And so it estranges us from those whose basic needs are unfulfilled. Now here he's so much like Rousseau in terms of arguing that money corrupts. It distances us from others.